Imagine commanding 40,000 soldiers in a foreign land, outnumbered 2-1 with no reinforcements in sight. That was Julius Caesar in Gaul, 52 BCE. But instead of retreating, he built a wall. Not just any wall, 2 walls. One to trap his enemies, another to protect his back. This impossible strategy won him one of history's greatest victories. But this is just the beginning of how Caesar conquered the known world. Today, we're diving into the military genius of Julius Caesar and, more importantly, what his strategies can teach us about winning our own battles, whether in business, politics, or life. We'll explore 10 key principles that made him history's most successful conqueror. Let's start with Caesar's first rule of conquest. Speed is everything. When Caesar received news of rebellion in Gaul, he didn't wait for spring like other generals. He marched through snow-covered Alps in January, catching his enemies completely off guard. They weren't ready for a Roman army in winter. Who would be? This wasn't just about being fast, it was about being unpredictable. Take the Battle of Dyrrhachium. Caesar's troops were running out of food. Traditional military wisdom said to retreat and resupply. Instead, Caesar launched an immediate attack on Pompey's superior forces. The sheer audacity of the move threw his enemies into confusion. While they were still trying to understand his strategy, Caesar had already secured key positions. This speed became Caesar's trademark. His famous quote, "I came, I saw, I conquered," wasn't just bragging. It was his entire strategy summarized in 5 words. While others planned, Caesar acted. While others waited for perfect conditions, Caesar created them. In the modern world, we'd call this first mover advantage. But here's what most people get wrong about Caesar. He wasn't just fast, he was smart about it. Take the Battle of Pharsalus. Caesar's army was exhausted from marching. Any other general would have rested their troops. Instead, Caesar ordered an immediate attack. Why? Because he knew Pompey's fresh troops were overconfident and undisciplined. Their very advantage became their weakness. This principle still applies today. Just ask any startup that's outmaneuvered a larger, slower competitor. This leads us to Caesar's second rule: turn weaknesses into strengths. During the siege of Alesia, Caesar's army was trapped between 2 enemy forces. A normal general would see this as a disaster. Caesar saw it as an opportunity. He built those 2 walls we mentioned earlier, one facing in, one facing out. This turned his surrounded position into a perfect defensive stronghold. The inner wall, 11 miles long, trapped Vercingetorix and his 80,000 men inside Alesia. The outer wall, 13 miles long, protected against the relief army of 250,000 Gauls. Caesar essentially turned a siege into a fortress. His enemies couldn't coordinate their attacks, and Caesar could respond to threats from either direction. This wasn't just military genius. It was architectural and engineering innovation on an unprecedented scale. Military strategy wasn't just about battles. Caesar mastered psychological warfare long before it had a name. Here's Rule 3. Control the narrative. After crossing the Rubicon, an act of treason, Caesar didn't apologize. Instead, he portrayed himself as the defender of Roman democracy against a corrupt Senate. He wasn't an invader, he was a protector. This mastery of propaganda extended to his written works. His Commentaries on the Gallic War wasn't just a military record. It was carefully crafted political messaging. He wrote about himself in the third person, making his victories seem more objective. He highlighted his clemency toward defeated enemies while downplaying his brutality. In today's terms, Caesar wasn't just winning battles, he was winning the media war. Let's talk about innovation, Caesar's fourth rule. In the siege of Marseille, his army had no naval experience. Did that stop him? He built a fleet from scratch and trained his soldiers to be sailors. When standard tactics didn't work, he invented new ones. He built towers, siege ramps, and engineering works that his enemies had never seen before. His engineers developed the Corvus, a boarding bridge with a spike that would lock enemy ships in place. This turned naval battles into infantry engagements, exactly what his land-based troops were good at. He effectively changed the rules of warfare to suit his strengths. Today, we'd call this disruptive innovation. Caesar's fifth rule was perhaps his most powerful. Know what drives people. His soldiers didn't just fight for Rome, they fought for Caesar. Why? Because he fought alongside them. He learned their names. He shared their hardships. When food was scarce, he ate what they ate. When they marched, he marched. During the Battle of Munda, his final major battle, Caesar's troops began to waver. What did he do? He grabbed a shield, ran to the front lines, and shouted, "This will be my last battle." His soldiers rallied instantly. They couldn't bear the thought of their general dying without them. This personal connection created unshakable loyalty. Rule 6. Adapt or die. In Gaul, Caesar faced enemies who excelled at guerrilla warfare. Rather than sticking to traditional Roman tactics, he adapted. He created a combined force of infantry, cavalry, and Germanic auxiliaries that could fight in any terrain against any enemy. He modified Roman equipment to deal with new threats. When Gallic chariots proved effective, he developed specific counter-tactics, but Caesar's genius wasn't just in winning battles, it was in winning peace. Rule 7. Victory is more than conquest. After defeating Gaul, he didn't just occupy it, he integrated it. He gave citizenship to Gallic nobles, incorporated their cavalry into his army, and respected their local customs. Within a generation, Gauls were serving in the Roman Senate. This wasn't just enlightened leadership, it was practical strategy. Happy provinces required fewer troops to control. Rule 8. Use success to build more success. Each victory gave Caesar resources for the next campaign. Conquered territories provided troops, supplies, and bases for further expansion. It was a self-reinforcing cycle of conquest. The wealth from Gaul funded his political campaigns in Rome. Military victory brought political power, which brought more military resources. However, Caesar's story also teaches us about the dangers of success. Rule 9. Beware the victory trap. After conquering Gaul, defeating Pompey, and becoming dictator of Rome, Caesar became overconfident. He dismissed warnings about the Ides of March. He forgot that not everyone loved his success. His assassins used his predictable daily routine against him. This brings us to the final and most important rule. Never stop evolving. Caesar's early victories came from being unpredictable. But as he gained power, he became set in his ways. His enemies learned to predict him. On March 15, 44 BCE, that predictability cost him his life. So, what's the real lesson from Caesar's conquest of the world? Is it about military strategy, political maneuvering, leadership? It's all of these, but it's also something more. It's about understanding that success comes from constant adaptation, from turning disadvantages into advantages, and from never ever becoming comfortable with victory. Think about Caesar's principles in modern terms. Speed and surprise? Ask any tech startup. Turning weaknesses into strengths? Look at companies that turned the pandemic into an opportunity for innovation. Controlling the narrative? That's modern public relations. The principles that helped Caesar conquer the known world are the same ones driving success today. Now, here's the question that haunts military historians. If Caesar had lived longer, what would he have conquered next? He was planning a massive campaign against Parthia when he died. Some historians believe he intended to push all the way to India. What could a man who conquered Gaul in 8 years have done with another decade? But perhaps that's not the question we should be asking. Maybe the real question is, what territories, literal or metaphorical, lie unconquered before you? What walls do you need to build? What enemies do you need to turn into allies? How will you use Caesar's principles to conquer your own world? Because in the end, we're all conquerors of our own worlds. The only question is, will you use Caesar's rules to build your empire? And more importantly, once you've built it, will you remember the lessons that got you there?